not a floor person. I was too old for that game when I wasn't too old for that game.
Welcome to the Third Eye Meditation Group. My name is Ken Sigmund, and I'm a teacher at Gulf Coast Insight Meditation, based in Port Richey. And we do these groups every other Wednesday at 6:30. The format is I do a guided meditation for about 25 minutes or half an hour. Then I talk about something related to that. There's time for questions. As I said last week, there are 4 key principles in this type of practice. Loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. So I'm walking through these coming weeks. And last week we did loving kindness. So today I'm going to talk about compassion. And when I told a friend of mine about that today, she said, "Are you going to talk about self-compassion?" I said, "I always talk about self-compassion, because compassion without self-compassion is incomplete." So, and I should let you all know, my left side hearing aid is in the shop, because technology works sometimes. 25 years in Silicon Valley taught me sometimes. So if you have any questions, like after the meditation, just shout at me. So, I'm pretty centered, you know.
Okay.
So first, I invite you to find a comfortable meditation posture. A meditation posture.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is anybody bothered by that cutting sound?
Well, my left side hearing aid is out. I can't hear it.
You guys good? We're fine. Fantastic. Sorry.
Thank you.
I can't hear things behind me anyway, so.
I can hear it.
My father was deaf as a board. My mother was deaf as a board. My brother, you know, it's kind of the way it goes. So, a meditation posture is one in which you are alert and relaxed at the same time, and comfortable. Emphasis on comfortable. Somebody asked me about this. It's a fallacy in meditation that you have to be completely still all the time. If something hurts, move. The obvious solution. This is not Zazen, where they sit totally emotionless for hours at a time.
That's where that there was sitting on the floor. Can't do either of those.
3 knee surgeries later, I don't sit on the floor anymore. If you're sitting with your back straight, like just in its natural curve, if you're like slouched, then you're actually less attentive and it's harder to focus. And when you enter a meditation posture, it's a signal from your psyche and your body to whatever that you're entering into something other than your regular walking around state. So, so with your back straight and your feet flat and your hands in your lap, unless you're sitting cross-legged, in which your feet will not be flat. And if you can sit in the lotus position, you are better and more flexible than I am. And if you tuck into your chin a little bit, and it's like it's a string at the crown of your head, just like tugging up slightly, that straightens the muscles, straightens the top vertebrae in your neck without straining or stressing the muscles in your shoulders and neck. There is no reason to stress or strain anything. And if you look down the bridge of your nose, that relaxes the muscles around your eyes. And gently close your eyes. And let's start by just taking a few slow, deep breaths just to get started. Help us connect to the body, help us connect to the moment. About 3/4, no strain. And I invite you to notice any contact points, the sensations of your feet on the floor, what that feels like on the bottom of your feet. The sensations of your hands resting in your lap. How that feels on your legs and how that feels on your hands. Just notice the sensations of gravity gently pulling you into your seat. The sensations on your bottom, on the cushion or the floor. Another long, slow, deep breath. And as you breathe out, relax the muscles in your face. Just let them fall. They do a lot of work. Let your eyes rest back in their sockets. There's nothing to look at. Letting your breathing return to normal. Just being aware of the sensations of the in-breath, your belly and your chest expanding. And on the out-breath, just continuing to relax and soften. Noticing any place where you might experience like tension or stress or tightness in your body. Just breathing out the tension to whatever degree you can. Just relaxing into this moment. If there's any sound, if you hear anything, it's not a distraction. You might want to say quietly to yourself, hearing. Notice what you experience in your body when you hear whatever it is you might hear. And in the midst of our experience, there's the breathing, which accompanies us all the time, and is always happening in the here and now, which is where our body always is. Breathing in, aware of breathing in. Breathing out, aware of breathing out. And just letting your attention land on your breathing. And when your mind wanders off in thought, which it will, it's okay, it's supposed to. Don't stress, don't strain. When you notice, just gently slide your attention back to your breathing. And start again focused on the breath. As many times as you need to. And relax your face and unfurl your brow. Just rest gently on the sensations of the body, breathing in and out. Thoughts arise, feelings arise. They come, they go. No stress, no recrimination. When you notice, just start over again with the breathing. And as we come towards the end of this sitting, I invite you to breathe into whatever stillness you may be experiencing. Just letting yourself, your body, and your mind settle into this moment where nothing is actually happening. And let the stillness of this meditation settle your body, settle your mind. Bring a little peace to your heart. Knowing that you can touch this peace anytime. And remind yourself to just settle. And may it be that this practice enables us to be a little more centered and settled as we walk around in the world. Make it easier to greet the world with kindness and compassion. See the world through kind eyes. May that energy of centeredness and calm and kindness flow into our relationships with the people close to us, with the people in our households, with the people around town, the people we just encounter, with ourselves. Kindness, compassion. May the benefits of this practice be of benefit to all beings everywhere. May all beings be happy. May all beings be well. May all beings be safe. May all beings be at ease and at peace. Thank you for your practice. Anybody have any questions about what we just did?
How long is that?
About half an hour.
It never feels that long. Thank you.
Sometimes I'm meditating and it feels like it goes by really quickly. Sometimes I'm meditating and I feel like I've been sitting there all day long.
Well, this one felt quick to me.
Good. So today we're going to talk about compassion, the second of the Four Noble States. I have a slight dilemma. I'm a Buddhist. Never know how overtly Buddhist to be in these sessions. And I was talking to another teacher about that this week. And she said, just do what calls to you. That works. So Buddhism is focused on the idea that life includes suffering. The word that was first, Buddhism wasn't written down for 500 years. It was first written down in Pali, and the word is dukkha. And Buddhism is the great debate society, and people have been debating all of this time over what that means. Dissatisfaction, grief. There's a certain amount of that built into life. The truth of that, at least for me, is very liberating, because it suggests when I'm experiencing difficulty, that it doesn't mean there's anything wrong. It just means that this is the natural course of life. I'm still okay. It's just a little difficult. Maybe it's a lot difficult, and I can still decide that I'm okay. And through that lens, we can look through that lens and recognize compassion. It's the practice of being present with another's suffering and understanding and exploring ways to help relieve it. Not to be confused with codependence, which is being present with another's suffering and giving up our own well-being. So compassion has boundaries. And it starts with self-compassion, with offering ourselves the same kindness and compassion and forbearance we would offer to our best friend who was in the same situation. I was at a workshop on self-compassion one time, and she gave us this challenge. She said, take out a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle. And at the top, write a really difficult situation. On the left-hand side, write down all the things you usually tell yourself in situations like that. On the right-hand side, write down all the things you would tell your best friend. Eliminate the parts that don't work for you. I say this over and over again. There's no difficult situation that can't be made worse by being hard on yourself. If you went to your best friend with a troubling situation, you would really appreciate their compassion. But if they wagged their finger and scolded you or took an inventory of your personality, a negative inventory, you would not appreciate that. But we do that to ourselves all the time. And if that was ever going to help, if all this being hard on ourselves was ever going to help, it would have helped by now. It would have helped years ago. And we live in a culture that doesn't really teach this. So compassion liberates us from having to feel that we're broken if we're struggling. And it gives us an opportunity to use our pain as a lens to see somebody else's pain. And the first thing anybody needs is to feel seen. I was a shrink for 25 years. At the very beginning of that, this is what got me into that. I was volunteering as a grief counselor, and they connected me with a woman. I grew up in a very chaotic, dysfunctional, and violent home. It's a very large club. A friend of mine once sent me this cartoon. I used to have it up on the wall near my desk. It's a big auditorium. And there's a banner at the back that says, Conference of Adult Children of Normal Families. There's like one person sitting over there. There's like one person sitting over there, and they're not looking at each other. Everybody has something going on. And they introduced me to this woman whose experience mirrored mine growing up. Now, I never told her any of that, but she knew that I got it. I could see her, and that made it easier for her to talk about what her experience was. So compassion begins with our willingness to see suffering and not judge it. You may have heard we're having a national epidemic of addiction in America. I'm not going to get into the politics of that because that's extremely discompassionate. One of the solutions to that is 12-step programs. One of the cores to that is when an addict who has been there meets another addict who is there and sees them, and that's the healing experience. And it requires us to look at and acknowledge our own pain. And I'm not going to tell you that's easy, and I'm not going to tell you that we don't have to practice it. The first place we go is, right? Some form of aversion. We cringe. But something comes next, after the cringe. Now, it can be, don't bother me, which is some version of I'm afraid of this. Or it can be, I see you, which heals both of us. It's not just sympathy or feeling sorry for one another. It's more like empathy, where we can take our experience and turn it into a lens through which we can see somebody else. I don't know if anybody here or out there has ever had the experience of being in a really troubled spot and feeling seen. It's extremely healing. I was a therapist specializing in working with people, adults with childhood trauma. Most of that happens behind closed doors. There's no witness. I got to say, I am your witness. People feel seen. Seeing people, acknowledging people is the act of compassion. Kyogam Trungpa, isn't that a great name? Arguably the man who brought Tibetan Buddhism to America, wrote in his book, Training the Mind and Cultivating Loving Kindness. Compassion is based on some sense of a soft spot in us. It is as if we had a pimple on our body that was very sore, so sore that we do not want to rub it or scratch it. That sore spot on our body is an analogy for compassion. Why? Because even in the midst of intense aggression, insensitivity in our life, or laziness, we always have a soft spot, some point we can cultivate, or at least not bruise. Every human being has that basic sore spot, even animals have. When we deny that, then we start acting it out, right? So how do we meet people who are acting out in their suffering? I worked inpatient in an adolescent psych ward for 2 years. First thing I noticed when I got there was nobody had been there for more than 2 years. It's a high burnout job. There's a lot of judgmentalism about the kids acting out. And I really like the term acting out. I think it's very precise. Because people who don't heal their pain act it out. You know, the current meme going around, hurt people, hurt people. I was always impressed at the precision with which somebody's grief and pain came out as behavior. Can we look at somebody who is acting in a way that doesn't work for us and say, oh, this person is suffering and this is what that looks like? Instead of, this is a bad guy, do something about it. Now, we can't address everything, right? But we can at least look and say, first off, there's nothing here to be taken personally. Because if they weren't doing this in front of you, they'd be doing this in front of somebody else. This is how people act. And then we can say, I see you. May have told this story here before. I'll tell it again. I was in a coffee shop in Santa Cruz, California. You know you're in a coffee shop in Santa Cruz, California, because there's 25 different kinds of pour-overs lined up on the counters. And the guy next to you is saying, I'll take a little bit of this one, a little bit of that one, a half of that one, and a quarter of this one. And the barista's eyes are like glazing over. Coffee in California. There was a guy who was a well-known homeless guy in Santa Cruz who was in the coffee shop, and he was being aggressive. I think he just wanted something to drink. And he started to escalate, and people behind the counter started to escalate. And you know what happens with escalation, right? Somebody goes up here, and then somebody meets them, and that gives them the energy to do this. And they meet them again, and it's like this. So they're like starting to do this thing. It's a little scary. First, I had to check in and notice that I'm breathing a little faster. And then I looked at this guy and I just like tapped him really gently on the arm and said, "Hey man, are you having a rough day?" And at first it startled him, but it cooled him off a little bit. It's cooled everybody else off a little bit. He felt seen. He didn't really need much more than that. People who are suffering need to feel seen. And they're acting out their pain. They're not doing something to you. And it's, compassion is the alternative to the normal psychic ping pong. Something's going to happen. I'm going to be attached to an outcome or to that, or I'm going to be averse to it. I'm attached to my experience or I'm averse to my experience, right? So I'm like stuck on a ping pong table going back and forth. I injured my leg a few weeks ago. I don't recommend that. I had to spend 10 days sitting at home with my leg elevated. I wasn't very happy about that. To the degree that and I'm not saying I did this all the time, but to the degree that I could lean into that experience, I was having a much easier time with it. To the degree to which I was like stuck in my head with, oh my God, how terrible this is, I was just that much more miserable. Compassion, starting with self-compassion, compassion towards our experience, compassion towards the experience of those around us, relieves us of that back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. It helps us stay a little more centered, stay where we are. To offer people witness and willingness to be of assistance, even if it's something very small, it doesn't have to be a big deal. Without judgment, without pity. Judgment is just a form of fear. It's a way we separate ourselves from other people. So it's not us. I'm not that. Oh, yes, you are. There's one of the Hindu sages, Ramanaji, one of my faves. Famous story about Ramana. Someone goes to Ramana and says, "How should we treat others?" And he says, "There are no others. We're all in this together." And it helps us be present with whatever's happening now rather than projecting our stuff onto it. Mindfulness, and I suggest practicing 20 minutes a day, by the way. Mindfulness helps us see when we're projecting our experience into the present moment instead of living in the present moment. You can think of your psyche as like this giant filing cabinet behind your eyes. It stretches back for miles. Something happens in front of us. We reach back, we pull out something roughly similar, hold it in front of us, and that's the lens through which we see that, right? So it's unclear whether we are responding to what's happening right now or reacting to what happened in 1975. Compassion helps relieve us of that. Because when we are bringing the past forward into a projection, we're avoiding our own suffering of the moment, and we're letting the past trigger this. And when we notice that we're doing that, it's an opportunity to say, oh, I haven't healed that yet. Emphasis on yet. I believe that we are always moving towards wholeness and healing. And there are obstacles. There are going to be obstacles. Okay, there are always obstacles. We get triggered. Okay, we get triggered and we react faster than we otherwise might want to. Working with trauma survivors, childhood trauma survivors, stuff triggers. People get triggered all the time. we can meet ourselves with compassion and recognize that that is happening rather than responding. That's a healing moment. That moment when we notice it. Now, people used to come to me and say, well, that only happened once over 3 weeks. I said, wow, that happened once over 3 weeks. When I work with these kids, they come home and they go home, and families will still come in for family therapy. And, you know, they've been trying to get the 14-year-old to take out the garbage for how long? That's like, is that the oldest dilemma of like raising teenagers, trying to get the 14-year-old to take out the garbage? There's a lot of rage and anger in this family system, and it kind of came out in that. And the dad comes in and reports, well, he took out the garbage, but only once. I was like, wow, he took out the garbage. No small victories. No small victories. Anytime you can step out of your projection, close the filing cabinet behind your eyes, see what's actually going on in front of you, meet somebody's suffering through the lens of your own in a way that is helpful to you both, even if only for a second, big deal. It's a healing moment for everybody. Judgment is also the biggest obstacle to compassion. That guy's an asshole. He may well be, but sometimes so am I. There are people who will attest to that. Short story about that. When I worked at juvenile hall, should never have done this. I was on the mental health team at juvenile hall. One of the kids said, "You're an asshole." I said, "That's Mr. Asshole to you, dude." Always meet them with humor. They generally don't argue with that. That stuck to me like a bad suit for about 3 weeks. And one of the kids was like, "Why are you putting up with that?" And it's like, why do I care? It's what this person needs to do to like be okay navigating with me. Okay, that's fine. It makes me less scary. Nobody's called me that for a long time. And compassion, is anybody here familiar with the 4 agreements? Second agreement, take nothing personally. Compassion is the path to that. And mindfulness helps us see when we're getting trapped on our own stuff and step back and say, this isn't about me. This is about just the suffering that exists in this person's life and in my life, and just the universal nature of suffering. And I can step forward instead of back if it's safe. I worked at juvenile hall, it wasn't always safe. We can step forward and say, I meet you here. And it's something as simple as I see you can be enough. So, this is not an opportunity for you to be hard on yourself for those moments of discompassion that we all encounter. There's a reason why they call meditation a practice. There's a reason why they call the Dharma a practice. It's like practicing the piano. Eric Clapton, you all know about Eric Clapton, has been known to practice 12 hours a day. John Coltrane once locked himself in the attic for 2 weeks and practiced. We practice these things. We get a little better at a time as time goes by. So thank you for your kind attention. Comments about criticisms? Ken, go back to being a bartender. Which is what I did after I was a cab driver and before I was a shrink. And it's a line that runs through all of those.
Are there any thoughts on why teenagers end up that way, other than dysfunctional families and trauma? But like,
I'm sorry.
is it just a part of being 14?
Well, first off,
that way a bit?
I was going to write a book on this at one point.
You should, but
Yeah. The nature of resilience is one of the great mysteries of psychology. This person comes from this traumatically dysfunctional family and is completely dysfunctional, can't function. This person comes from the same family and is fine. Nobody really knows the answer to that riddle. Famous trauma psychologist in Canada, I can't remember his name right at the moment, wrote a book about this. And the thing about teenagers, people forget. Most people don't know. The brain is not fully developed until between 24 and 27 years old. And the last piece to come into place is the front end of the cerebral cortex, which is where you do all of your what's called executive functioning. It's how you make good decisions. It's where you make decisions in general. It's how you discern right from wrong. It's how you remember that didn't work out last time. There could be consequences. We were talking about karma earlier. There could be consequences. People would bring these teenagers to me and say they're really impulsive. That's right, because the part that controls that isn't here yet. So it has a lot to do with that. And kids who are traumatized, well, I'm not going to launch into my whole thing on this, but what's the first thing your parents taught you? Very first. When you cried, they picked you up. So your very first experience was when you are dissettled, you can be calmed down. The brain is starting to wire from the moment you come out of the womb. I mean, it's wiring from the moment, but it starts to wire with external stimuli. Suppose you didn't have that. Your brain is not being wired for that. So as a result of which, flash forward 14-year-old kid at juvenile hall, he doesn't have the wiring or the skills to de-escalate when he's amped up. We have to teach them that. Did I help answer your question?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. As I said, I was about to write a book on this, but I kind of got derailed. I was about to write a book on Hoagie Carmichael at one point, but that got derailed too. I used to write for a living, so I have a lot of notes on this sort of stuff. So, anything else? Okay. Shay knows how to reach me, and I'll leave some cards out. I do this for fun and for free, but I have a hat over there if you want to toss something in it. That's not required or requested. I suggest you meditate for 20 minutes a day. I said that at the sitting I do at the library. I'm also at the Newport Richey Library every Friday at 1 o'clock. A woman said, that feels impossible. I said, well, it may well be. But when I first started, 20 minutes was a very long time. Start where you are. Start with 10. It's a very simple instruction. I have instructions in my bag. I forgot to put them out. Focus on your breathing. Find a posture and focus on your breathing. Mind wanders off. Bring it back. You may have to do this 45 times. My teacher refers to that as the manual labor of meditation. Just noticing that your mind, he's been doing this for 50 years and he's a great teacher. Noticing that your mind has wandered off and just coming back. You'll start to notice certain things. The effects of meditation are subtle but cumulative. You'll start to notice you're a little more focused. You'll start to notice that your blood boils a little more slowly. You'll feel a little kinder towards yourself and others. You'll be just a little more settled walking around, little bits at a time, but start 10 to 20 minutes every day. Joseph Goldstein, who wrote a great book on this called Seeking the Heart of Wisdom, said, never let a day go by without it, even if it's just 2 minutes. So.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming back. Thanks for coming.
Oh, Yeah. I'll do that.
And thank you.
Who was that?
All the people on the internet.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.